I jumped awake. The stench of the medlock still filled my nostrils, a combination of industrial filth with something ancient and putrid. In the darkness of my bedroom, I could still see Crick's terrified face, eyes wide with knowledge no child should possess. My hands trembled as I fumbled for matches, knocking over the glass of water on my bedside table. The liquid spread across the wooden surface, and for one horrifying moment, I thought I saw fingers forming in the puddle, reaching toward me. I struck the match. Nothing there, just water. My heart hammered against my ribs as if trying to escape. I pressed my palm against my chest, feeling each frantic beat. The nightmare had seemed so real. Trevila's waterlogged form lunging from the darkness, her mouth opening impossibly wide. "Pull yourself together, man," I muttered, lighting the lamp with shaking hands. I reached for my notebook, the leather binding cool against my fingers. The pages fell open naturally to my most recent entries. I dipped my pen and began to write. I must understand what Trevila is before she understands how to kill me. This is no longer investigation. It is survival. She knows my name. She knows my face. And whatever happened in that tenement marked me somehow. I am a beacon to her, and anyone near me is in danger. I paused, pen hovering over the paper. The boy, Crick, is the key. He knows her weaknesses. He's survived her attention longer than anyone. I must find him again, but carefully, very carefully. I closed the notebook and stared into the lamp's flame as I awaited the dawn. The police station smelled of ink, boot polish, and the lingering odor of too many unwashed bodies crammed into the holding cells. I'd once belonged here, among the constables and inspectors, before Angel Meadow changed everything. Constable Hawthorne spotted me across the room and ambled over, his broad frame casting a shadow as he approached. His uniform hung a bit looser than it had a year ago, but his boots still gleamed with military precision. "Well, if it isn't the ghost hunter himself," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Come to arrest any spectres today, Uskwood?" "Only if they're breaking the law, Hawthorne." I couldn't help but smile. Our banter was familiar territory, safe ground between us. "What brings you back to the land of the living? Tired of chasing shadows?" I leaned on my cane. "I need access to the archives, missing children cases specifically." Hawthorne's smile faded. "That's a grim business. Not sure the Chief Inspector would." "I'm not asking the Chief Inspector. I'm asking you." He studied me for a long moment, the scar on his face pulling tight as he frowned. "This about your unusual investigations. It might save lives." Hawthorne sighed. "Come on then. But you didn't get this from me." The archive room was cold and damp, shelves sagging under the weight of leather-bound volumes and stacked case files. Hawthorne lit an oil lamp and pulled several ledgers from different shelves. "Missing persons, last 12 months. Children's cases are marked with red tabs." I flipped through the pages, my stomach knotting as the pattern emerged. There are dozens here. Sad facts of Manchester life. Poor families, hungry children, some run off, some... Hawthorne didn't finish. "But this many?" "Been worse than usual, I'll grant you that." My fingers traced the entries, noting dates, locations, descriptions. Most came from the poorest areas. Angel Meadow, Amcoats, the Warrens near the river. Places where a missing child might not prompt much official concern. Then a name caught my eye. A report from a village near Alderley Edge. It seemed the missing were not constrained within the city limits. "William Carr," I read aloud. "Age 10. Nicknamed Cricket, or Crick. Disappeared 4 months ago." "That one's odd," Hawthorne said. "Doesn't fit the pattern of the others. The mother claims the boy ran away after his father was killed in a dog attack." My pulse quickened. "The mother's name?" "Elwyn Carr. Still living there according to our last correspondence." I copied the address into my notebook with unsteady hands. Crick, the boy from the tunnels, it had to be him. You've got that look, Hawthorne said, watching me closely. What look? Like you're about to walk into something terrible and you know it. I snapped my notebook shut. Thank you for this. Uskwood, he called as I headed for the door. Whatever you're chasing, be careful. That December afternoon, as chilled darkness descended over Manchester, I penned a letter to Eloin Carr by lamplight, requesting permission to visit regarding her son's disappearance. As I dropped it into the postbox just outside my residence, I wondered if I was leading Dravila straight to Crick's mother, or if, perhaps, finally, I was closing in on some answers. The next morning found me climbing the worn stone steps of Chetham's library. The ancient sandstone building loomed against the grey Manchester sky, its Gothic arches like gaping mouths frozen in a perpetual screen. I'd visited occasionally during my days with the police, but today I came seeking darker knowledge. Inside, the library wrapped around me like a shroud, all dark wood, leaded windows, and the musty perfume of decaying paper. A profound silence hung in the air, broken only by the occasional creak of timber or the soft rustle of turning pages. Scholars hunched over ancient texts, their faces half illuminated by gas lamps that cast more shadow than light. I approached the main desk, where a thin woman with silver-streaked hair pulled into a severe bun sat cataloguing a stack of leather-bound volumes. Without looking up, she raised one finger, signalling me to wait. Name and purpose, she finally said, her voice clipped as a winter's hedge. Alaric Uskwood. I'm researching historical accounts of missing children in Manchester. At this, she glanced up, her spectacles catching the lamplight. Recognition flickered across her sharp features. Mr. Uskwood, the detective. The pause before detective carried the weight of Pennyman's articles. I am Miss Vernon, senior librarian. What period interests you? As far back as records go, particularly cases with unusual circumstances. Her pen scratched against paper. Newspaper archives are in the East Wing, census records in the North Gallery. Follow me. For hours, I lost myself in brittle newspapers and parish records. My eyes burned from the strain of reading faded ink, but patterns emerged like ghostly footprints. Children vanishing without trace, mostly from the poorest districts near rivers and mills. Some years showed spikes in disappearances, followed by lulls, never stopping completely. An 1803 broadsheet caught my attention. 3 children of Spinner's Alley gone missing. Mothers claim dark woman of the mills took them. Another from 1827. River's widow claims 4th victim this winter. Authorities dismiss as superstition. My hands trembled as I copied these references into my notebook. The same entity, different names through the decades, always taking children. When Miss Vernon returned to check on my progress, I decided to press further. I need material on folklore, specifically water spirits or demons that target children. Her face paled. We have general folklore in the West Gallery. I need something more specific. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. Demonology texts, occult references. The pencil in her hand snapped. Those materials are not available to the public, Mr. Uskwood. Anything heretical and anti-ecclesiastical are bound to the general public. But they exist. She glanced around, then leaned toward me. There is a collection below. Some of us here call it the Arcane Library, locked away for good reason. I need to see it. Absolutely not. No one goes down there. The church were right to lock all that away from the casual eyes. It's not meant for us. I fixed her with a gaze, sensing she had something more to say. A confession, perhaps. I noted her fingers twisted nervously in her lap. The room is not right. Things move. Voices whisper when no one is there. I studied her face, the tight lines around her mouth, the fear lurking behind professional detachment. You've experienced it yourself? She shook her head as if in denial. Nothing specific, just shadows that seem to move, shapes in the corner of your eye that vanish when you look directly at them. Once, she swallowed hard, I opened one of the books written in Latin. When I turned the pages, I saw things. My mother's face in the margins, though she'd been dead for years. Miss Vernon, I said gently, I investigate such phenomena. If your arcane library is haunted, perhaps I could help while conducting my research. Her eyes narrowed. You're the one from the papers, the uncanny inspector. Pennyman exaggerates, but yes. They say you're mad. They said the same about those who claimed disease came from unseen germs, not bad air. She almost smiled at that. And what if you find something down there, something real? Then we'll know what we're facing. For a long moment, she stared at me, weighing something in her mind. Then she reached into her desk drawer and withdrew a rusted iron key, its head shaped like an open eye. The door is behind the theology archive. Look for the stone with the 3 notches. She pressed the key into my palm, her fingers cold against mine, before lowering her voice. If you ask me, the dead don't rest down there, Mr. Uskwood. The key felt unnaturally heavy in my hand. I'll return before closing. See that you do. She straightened her spine, professional mask sliding back into place. And Mr. Uskwood, if you do see anything, make sure you keep it out of the papers. We don't want any scandal here. We certainly don't want to advertise that part of the library for the curious. I nodded my agreement, promised complete integrity, and tucked the key into my waistcoat pocket. The hunt for Dravila had led me here, to this forbidden archive beneath Manchester's oldest library. Whatever waited in that darkness, I would face it. For Crick, for the missing children, and for my own sanity. As I gathered my notes and headed toward the theology archive, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Not by Miss Vernon or the other patrons, but by something older, something that had waited centuries for someone to turn its rusty lock. I found the stone with the 3 notches behind a towering bookcase in the theology archive. Behind it, the wall appeared solid until I turned around an obscure alcove. Then a door appeared hidden from view. The lock turned with a sound like grinding teeth. Cold air rushed out as the door swung open, carrying the scent of mildew. A narrow stone staircase spiraled down into darkness. No gas lamps here, only iron brackets that contained unlit candles. On a small desk next to the door lay a lantern for use by anyone descending into this part of the building. I lit the lantern and began my descent. The stairs seemed to go down farther than the building's foundations should allow. 17 steps, a small landing, then a further 30. The walls wept moisture. My leg ached with each step, the pain sharpening as the air grew colder. When I finally reached the bottom, I found myself in a chamber that had no right to exist beneath Manchester. Curved stone walls supported a vaulted ceiling with carved figures. Bookshelves radiated outward from a central point like the spokes of a wheel, many leaning at precarious angles, warped by damp and age. What in God's name is this place? I whispered, my breath fogging in the chill. No one answered, but the silence felt attentive. I approached the nearest shelf, leather-bound volumes, some chained in place, others crumbling to dust. Titles in Latin, Greek, and languages I couldn't identify. I recognized Old Welsh on some spines, and what appeared to be ecclesiastical shorthand on others. At the center of the room stood a reading desk with a chair bolted to the floor. Someone had prepared this space for study, knowing full well the danger of what they read. I placed my lantern on the desk and selected a promising volume, a Roman codex bound in cracked leather, its pages brittle with age. My Latin was rudimentary at best, but enough to piece together fragments. Localis tribus adorabant multos deas et deas naturae. Una praecipiu erat dea vindictae mortis et putredinis. The local tribes worshipped many gods and goddesses of nature. One in particular was a vengeful goddess of death and decay. I turned the page carefully. The next passage described how the goddess demanded sacrifice when humans committed crimes against the natural order. Children were offered to appease her, ensuring the survival of others. The Romans had suppressed this cult, but not its spirit. Nomen eius in lingua locali Drevila. Her name in the local tongue, Drevila. My blood went cold. The candle beside me guttered without any breeze. When I looked up, the shadows in the far corner seemed different, rearranged. I returned to my reading with trembling hands. Another book, this one in Middle English, contained accounts from early Christian missionaries. They described encounters with a lady of the waters who stole children and whispered through reflections. The monks had developed sigils to ward against her influence. I leafed through illustrated pages showing protective symbols. My heart quickened as I recognized the patterns identical to those Crick had drawn in the tunnels. The boy hadn't invented these sigils. He'd somehow rediscovered ancient knowledge. The missionaries wrote of Drevila's particular hatred for those who could see her true form. She hunted them relentlessly, using other children as bait. Those with the sight were both her greatest threat and most coveted prey, like Crick. I flipped to another passage, this one describing how Drevila entered our world. She comes through water and through the dark places of the earth, through dreams and through blood. But most potent is the summoning of her name in places of knowledge where her story is told. Without thinking, I muttered aloud, Drevila. The lantern extinguished instantly. In the perfect darkness that followed, I heard the rustle of pages, not from the book in my hands, but from every book in the library, a rising sound like 1,000 sheets of paper fluttering at once. I fumbled for matches, struck one against the box, and in that brief flare of light, I saw books pulling themselves from shelves, pages ripping free and swirling through the air like frenzied birds. The match went out. I struck another. This time I saw them, transparent figures materializing between the bookshelves, robed monks with downcast eyes, children with hollow sockets where eyes should be, and near the stairs, a tall female figure draped in a black veil, water dripping from her hem, forming a pool on the stone floor. The match burned my fingers. Darkness again. Cold wind shrieked through the chamber, though there were no windows, no vents, no earthly explanation for the frigid gale that now tore through the ancient space. It howled with the voices of 1,000 lost souls, each note a piercing lament that seemed to drill into my very marrow. Pages slapped against my face with violent force, their edges sharp as razors, leaving stinging welts across my cheeks and forehead. Leather-bound book spines smashed against the back of my head with bruising impact, as though hurled by unseen hands that knew precisely where to strike for maximum pain. The air itself had become thick with malevolence, charged with a palpable hatred that seemed directed entirely at me, the fool who had dared speak her name in this sacred repository of ancient knowledge. By doing so, I had torn away the veil, releasing the very spirits that inhabited this place of dark knowledge and evil secrets. I dropped to my knees, the cold flagstones biting through my trousers as I began crawling desperately toward where I remembered the door to be. My hands scraped against the rough stone floor. Each movement was a battle against the malevolent wind that seemed determined to pin me in place. My cane tip, clutched tightly in my trembling fingers, struck stone with a metallic clang sending a shower of bright sparks cascading through the oppressive darkness, momentary stars that illuminated nothing but my own terror-stricken face, reflected in puddles of black water that shouldn't have been there. I dragged myself to the doorframe, feeling the ancient wood with my fingers. My silver-tipped cane could serve as a stylus. Working blindly, I pressed the tip hard against the wood and began carving, following the pattern I'd memorized from Crick's drawings. The howling intensified. Something grabbed my ankle, dragging me backward. I kicked free, then continued to gouge the sigil into the doorframe. Cold breath on my neck, whispers in a language older than Latin, older than humanity. The moment the sigil was complete, the air itself seemed to contract, compressing inward as though the very atmosphere had become a living thing drawing a final breath. The howling changed pitch, transforming into a wail of frustration so piercing that I felt my eardrums might rupture. Spectral figures, mere suggestions of form that I could sense rather than truly see, were violently pulled toward the doorframe as if caught in a powerful current. Their ethereal bodies stretched and distorted, elongating beyond endurance, thinning into gossamer threads of ectoplasmic matter. They clawed at the flagstones, at the bookshelves, at anything solid, leaving frost-like patterns where their fingers dragged. One by one, they disappeared into the carved symbol like ashes sucked into a furnace, their essence compressed and contained by the ancient geometry that I had etched into the wood. The last figure, taller than the rest, with what appeared to be a veil of liquid darkness, turned toward me before being consumed, and I swear I saw lips move in a promise of retribution. Then, silence, complete and absolute. My hands shaking, I relit the lantern. The room was in chaos, books scattered everywhere, pages torn and floating in the still air. But the presences were gone, trapped within the sigil I'd carved. I gathered the most relevant texts, stuffing them into my satchel. As I climbed the stairs, my leg protesting with each step, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made myself a target. By speaking her name in that place of knowledge, I'd invited Dravila's attention. The veiled woman had seen me clearly now. The key turned heavily in the lock as I sealed the arcane library once more. Miss Vernon waited in the main hall, her face tight with worry. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Mr. Uskwood," she said quietly. "Not just one." I handed her the key, which seemed to burn in my palm. "Your library holds dangerous knowledge, Miss Vernon. Knowledge that should remain buried. Keep it locked. Keep people away. The church knows what it is doing." "But what did you see? Did you find what you need?" "I found what I feared." Outside, cold December twilight had fallen. Gas lamps flickered to life along the street, their reflections shimmering in rain puddles. In each watery mirror, I imagined I could see a veiled face watching me, patient as the grave. I wrote until my fingers cramped, candlelight guttering as the night deepened, the journal pages filled with my increasingly desperate scrawl. Dravila? Born of Manchester's rivers? No, older. The Romans found her here. The Industrial Revolution merely fed her. Coal smoke, iron furnaces, child labourers in mills and mines, all sacrifices of a sort. She feeds on forgotten children, I wrote, those unnamed and anonymous. The rise of industry feeds her desire for revenge on the city's young. Dawn found me slumped over my desk, ink-stained and bleary. Outside, sleet pelted the windows, turning Manchester's sooty facades to glistening black stone. I dozed fitfully, dreaming of veiled women rising from puddles, of Crick's pale eyes watching from shadows. A sharp knock jolted me awake. I limped to the door, one hand gripping my cane, the other reaching for the silver flask in my pocket. The knocking came again, more urgent. When I opened it, I found a woman standing in the dim hallway. Rain dripped from her dark woolen coat. Her face was pale but composed, framed by rain-dampened hair streaked prematurely with grey. Despite the weather, and what must have been a difficult journey, she stood straight-backed, with a quiet dignity that spoke of endured hardships. Her eyes caught mine, hazel flecked with gold, scanning my face with desperate hope. "Mr. Uskwood?" Her voice was low, cultured, though roughened by emotion. "Yes." "My name is Elwyn Carr." She clutched a letter in her gloved hand. My letter. From Alderley Edge. The name struck like a physical blow. Carr. The missing boy's mother. "Please come in from the cold, Mrs. Carr." I stepped aside, suddenly aware of my dishevelled appearance, the chaotic state of my flat. She entered cautiously, her gaze sweeping over the walls covered in notes, newspaper clippings, and sketched sigils. If she found it disturbing, she gave no sign. "I apologize for arriving unannounced," she said, removing her gloves. "But after receiving your letter, I couldn't wait. I took the first morning train." "Would you like tea? To warm yourself?" She shook her head. "Mr. Uskwood, I need to know." Her composure cracked slightly. "Have you seen my William?" I hesitated, wondering how much to reveal. This woman had already suffered enough without tales of demons and haunted subterranean tunnels. "The boy I encountered called himself Crick," I said carefully. Her breath caught. "That was my nickname for him. Cricket. Because he was always so quiet, but would suddenly chirp up with something profound." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Where is he? Is he safe?" I gestured to the chair. "Please sit. This isn't a simple letter." She remained standing. "Mr. Uskwood, I've endured months of not knowing if my son lives or breathes. I don't need comfort. I need truth." Her directness was refreshing after so many evasions and half-truths. "I believe I've seen your son," I admitted. "But he's in hiding. There's something pursuing him." "I know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I received your letter, Mr. Uskwood, and I believe you have seen him. I need to find my son, as he is in great danger." As the cold winter sun rose over Manchester, Elwyn and I began to discuss all that had occurred since Angel Meadow. And looking back, I had no idea how much her story intertwined with my own, holding our fates, our very destiny, in the balance of dark tidings. How could I have known then that this woman's pain would become mine, that her nightmares would soon populate my own? The threads of our lives were already tangled beyond recognition.